Welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Nourish Child Podcast. Today, I have guest Dani Lebovitz. She's a pioneering registered dietitian, trusted thought leader, and the creative mind behind Kid Food Explorers. With a mission to grow a healthier generation in mind, body, and imagination, she transforms food education into a playground of discovery. Drawing from her own experiences as a neurodiverse individual, Dani's innovative approach integrates STEAM principles and celebrates diversity, ensuring that every child feels valued, belongs, and thrives. She is the author of the Growing Adventurous Eaters book series, and today we are talking about the best ways to educate children about food. It's a spicy conversation I'm sure you will enjoy, and without further ado, here's Dani. Hey, Dani, welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited today to talk about food education, which I know you are very passionate about. And it is really what is the reason why I invited you on this show, because I think you do a very, very good job of conveying principles around educating children about food. And so before we get into like our conversation and some, specific questions I have for you, could you just introduce yourself in your own words to the audience?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Dani, and I'm a registered dietitian and a mom of 3 and a children's book author of 10 books. And really at the core of my work and why I do what I do is that my goal is to raise a healthier generation. And for me, I define healthy by body, mind, and imagination. And so my mission with Kid Food Explorers is to redefine current food education. And I do that by sparking curiosity with STEAM integrated food literacy experiences that celebrate diversity, boost self-confidence, ensuring that every child feels valued, belongs, and thrives.
I love that. I love that. We are aligned in a lot of ways. And while I will touch on food education, I think that you do such a fantastic job about it. Food education, let's sort of break down what that is. I know we hear food literacy. We talk about, how to educate kids about food. And there's a lot of education out there for children about food. What comes to mind right now is sort of, the posters in the doctor's office, which show all the different food categories or food groups and the foods we should avoid and the foods we should eat more of. But that sort of gets very specific, but it is a way to teach children about food. What is the difference between food education and food literacy? And, how have we been teaching kids about food? And is that the right way or not?
Yeah, I'm going to take that one at a time. So I'm going to back up a little bit. So the first thing I will say is let's talk food literacy. So food literacy is actually kind of this umbrella term. And so I say the core of my work is food literacy. And under that umbrella term of food literacy, it's like nutrition information. It's, where does your food come from, how it's grown, the cultural significance. It includes your cooking skills or techniques, food selection, gardening. It also includes your attitudes and how you feel about different foods, environmental stewardship, also social appreciation, eating practices, sustainability practices, the list goes on. So it's kind of this umbrella term, but the average person doesn't really understand or really know because it hasn't been part of traditional conversations about what food literacy is. And so what I like to do is call my work food education, because that feels a little bit more simple to communicate. But then again, the average person cares more specifically about nutrition education, because that's the lens we've always been taught. That's the status quo. So sometimes I'll say food and nutrition education. Nutrition can embody the food education piece. So it's it's something it's a dynamic conversation, and I'm continuing to work on how I kind of label that. But my work is under this umbrella, food literacy, that kind of encompasses all of that.
Okay.
And then the next question you asked is about traditional food education, which is kind of the status quo. And in my opinion, it really misses the mark. Traditional food education is taught through a lens that is, in my opinion, harmful. And also, I don't think it's appropriate for adults, but it is definitely not developmentally attuned for children. So the status quo and traditional lens of food education stems from a focus around health. More specifically, though, healthism, which is placing the moral obligation on your health as an individual, essentially saying that you are in control of your health, when we recognize that because of the social determinants of health, over 60% is outside of our control. And so part of this root of the traditional means for talking about food and nutrition is actually not appropriate and harmful for anybody. But then we also have this element of diet culture. And it is, this huge dichotomy of language and how we think and talk about food, and that we are adding a moral value to, or attributing a moral value to food, and we're making this stratification. So all of this in and of itself, even for adults, is kind of how we teach about food and nutrition. And we take those same concepts and then we use them to teach kids. And so we see these lessons that have been attuned to children, where they use some of the best practices based on ages and stages, like storytelling and play and sensory exploration and really fun. And it is wrapped up in this really cute package that makes it really feel like it's developmentally attuned. But at the core of the message, it's inaccurate, and it can lead to harm. And so, especially when we then consider cognitive development and the nature of a child's intelligence, we see that this actually is increasing our risk for disordered eating, and food and body shame and stigma and peer-to-peer stigmatization. And we're also seeing that we're not teaching kids things that are meaningful, that they need to know, that build lifelong skills. And instead of fostering and cultivating social emotional learning and development, this time of early childhood and rapid growth, we're actually, causing harm and shame. And so
Dani, is the, I want to just back up on a couple things, because I want to make sure my listeners understand a couple of terms that you used. Social determinants of health. Can you just briefly describe what you mean by that?
The social determinants of health are essentially the idea that everything that affects your expression of health is not just, what you eat or what you do not eat. It's not just your genetics. It also has to deal with the environments with which you live, which is where you live, work, and play. And so that plays into the conversation of health equity and food justice. So here, if we're talking about stratifying, you know, good versus bad or healthy versus unhealthy, or we're talking about different foods and we're telling children, well, you need, like your bag of chips is unhealthy, you should not eat that. Then the child is like, well, that's the only food that I have access to. That's the only thing that I have in my home. And so basically, a big core of my work is rooted in this concept of health equity through a food education lens. And actually, I'd like to share just a very quick story.
I'd love that. Yes.
So a child brings in a candy bar to school for lunch. And this candy bar, they had just had a lesson earlier in the day about which foods they should choose more of and which foods they should choose less of. So this child brings a candy bar to school for lunch that their parent packed for them. Now they sit down to have this candy bar, and their peers, what do you think they are saying about that candy bar?
Oh, it's bad. It's unhealthy. How could you have that?
They're policing.
Yeah.
So not only did that child maybe internalize and feel some shame when they were sitting in class and learning about, how foods are categorized, then they're further bullied or shamed while they're sitting with their peers about this candy bar. So this child is thinking, do my parents not know that it's unhealthy or that it's bad? Am I bad for liking it? Are they bad for giving it to me? That changes your relationship with your parent, right? And maybe this child, maybe that's the only food they have available to them for lunch that day.
Yeah.
Not every, like if they don't have the school lunch program, or maybe that's stigmatized too, right? So they're like, I'm not going to have that. I have this candy bar, and everybody likes candy bars. It tastes good. Okay. So this is based on a true story that was shared with me. Why did the parents send a candy bar? Do you want to guess?
Oh, I would imagine that the parent wanted to show love for their child, knew that the child really liked that and wanted to connect somehow with them while the child was at school. Maybe that's all the family had available, and it was better than not sending anything at all.
Yep. There's lots of reasons, right? So you mentioned like accessibility. Maybe the easiest place to get something was a corner store, and that was a candy bar, and that has a lot of energy, right? It's calorically dense. And so that would be able to sustain their child. But in actually this exact example, the parent grew up in a food insecure household. They were, this household was just below the poverty line. And the parent who had grown up in a food insecure household, who had always wanted to have a candy bar, never got one. Right. And so they had the money, and they were at the corner store, and they bought the child a candy bar, and that meant love. This was showing love and giving their child exactly what they had always wanted, didn't have. And so this child is sitting there, and, at first thought, it might be like, I'm feeling love. This is something I love. And then they're being shamed and stigmatized for it. And, everybody comes in different shapes and sizes. And it just invites so much more harm into this dynamic of this conversation that at the core, what we're trying to do is we want to teach food education instead of through a health lens. And I know we'll get to like ages and stages. But instead of teaching in the context of health, when we recognize that health is not a moral obligation and that so much more is outside of our control than we have over what we do or do not eat based on environmental factors, is that we want to teach meaningful things, things that build life skills, skills that build confidence and competence, and things that they can carry with them throughout their lives.
Yeah. Well said. I think I'm going to just be the devil's advocate and just, I know my audience well, and I know some of them are going to be thinking in their heads, well,
Sure.
obviously a candy bar isn't quote unquote healthy for a child. And so so when people push back about, and I'm 100% on board. I just posted
Oh,
on
I know.
LinkedIn.
No. I know you're not judging
I just
me.
posted. No. I just posted on LinkedIn about food shaming. I wrote a big article about it because there was some, Washington Post stuff happening, and I just was like, this is just. There's no room at the table for food shaming, and people shame and they don't know they're shaming. Okay,
Right. Because it's so normalized.
Yes, exactly. But there will be some parents who are like, come on, a candy bar for lunch. That's not that's not healthy. That's not what a child needs, blah, blah, blah.
And you or I would not send just a candy bar for lunch, but we are also not in that family's shoes. We don't have that lived experience, and that, there's so much more to food than nutrition.
Yes.
We don't know, and it's, who are we to judge for the decisions other parents make for their family?
Yeah.
So what I would respond to that person, and it's funny because on social media, I've had one post go viral from trolls about, I sprinkled sugar on strawberries. Okay. Now, in my mind, in your mind, in general, strawberries are sweet. They don't need any more sugar.
Right.
Except for one, these strawberries were not, they were sour. But even if they were sweet, they may be sweet to my taste buds, but not to somebody else's taste buds. And so I have one of my 3 kids doesn't do a whole lot of fruit, especially because of textures. And she doesn't like anything sour. Now, this child can eat an entire head of broccoli, roasted, crispy, salty broccoli. And she eats just about any vegetable, but it is very specific on textures, and she doesn't do sour. So no mushy, no smushy. So where am I going with this? I sprinkled sugar on there. I, in my caption, said, this is a tool. It's not, I'm always putting sugar on strawberries. Do I think sugars need strawberries? No. Do I think they need them all the time? No. But this is a tool to help I never say get, to help my child feel confident about trying it. I'm not here to get a child to eat a certain way. I'm here to boost their confidence and agency so that they want to explore it. So this relates back to a child or a parent thinking, well, that's not healthy. Okay, well, in the case of this child who may have not had any other food and that provided energy, that is healthy. You see, we all define healthy different ways. And so my response to that would be, okay, well then don't send that to lunch for your child. Please don't tell your child that that's bad and that's junk and that's trash and you've had enough sugar, because I know exactly the messages and the things a parent is saying to their child at home about food, because that is exactly what I hear out of their mouths to other children. And that leads to peer-to-peer stigma and shame. And that is why a big component of why my work is creating this community of kind, compassionate, and supportive kids who, in a generation who, instead of valuing food based on nutritional values that are often inaccurate in the way that they are perceived and shared, that we just call them what they are and help everybody feel safe and seen.
So what I hear you saying is you are, in the work that you do and the way that you promote education around food, you're really trying to shift the paradigm and make people more inclusive and supportive and understanding about the decisions that go behind food selection. And it does, you didn't really mention elitism, but it does get to be elitist when we can say, oh, those aren't organic strawberries. Not everybody values organic strawberries. Not everybody can access or afford.
I personally almost never purchase organic because we are, even with the work that I do, writing children's books about food education is not a profitable business. And I don't have a business mindset. I have an educator mindset. And I have been doing this work since 2015, since we moved to Germany. And then we've literally moved like 6 times since then. And I haven't held a regular job in food education. I've never taken a paycheck from my work. We have been a single income household since then. And fortunately, my husband is in the military and he makes a good salary. So we're able, because he is an officer, so we're able to live off of a single income. But I can't afford organic produce.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be eating very much if that's the standard.
I mean, I had 4 kids. We couldn't afford organic either. I mean, and I've always believed that, the point is to eat a lot of produce as much as
100%.
you can, not
canned, frozen, freeze dried, however you get them.
Split hairs over fresh and organic, because it's just not realistic. And I think we have to also acknowledge the fact that we're both dietitians and we're talking from a professional lens. Like we have to, our advice, and sometimes people get offended about this, consumers, because they think that we should be representing the most ideal diet for everybody all the time. And if we were to do that, we would be ignoring a lot of people in America who don't have access and the financial means to purchase the ideal diet.
And there honestly is no ideal diet. Like that is that is a part of the root of the problem, which I actually have a whole presentation on racism and oppression in our food system and the history of our food system, because how it has affected traditional foodways. And there's, on social media, you see a lot of people making memes about, well, you shame our traditional foods until it's the new superfood, and then it becomes the next best thing. And so I think that's another issue with the way we teach about food and nutrition, at least in the US, because it is through this very westernized lens, and that is the best way. And it fails to acknowledge the melting pot that we are in the US and the great diversity of foods, like a Korean child bringing kimbap for lunch, or a Indian child bringing a curry for lunch, and they are stigmatized and othered because it looks different and it feels different.
Yeah.
And I started this work because as a child, I am a multiply neurodiverse person. And I was always different, like before I was medicated and then when I was medicated, and with the supportive accommodations that were made for me. They were supportive, but they further othered me because I stood out as being different. I had to leave the class to get medication. I had to leave the class for extra help. And so, instead of highlighting those things, let's build those, we'll call them accommodations. Let's build our education system around food and bodies to be intrinsically part of how we communicate and celebrating those differences.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's dive into how to educate children about food in this more inclusive, supportive, modern way. Let's call it more modern. And so take us through how you think about this. And then let's start with infants.
Okay.
Do we even educate infants about food? And if you are educating, what really is the goal here, right?
Okay.
And for parents.
Yes. So for parents and educating kids about food, listen, eating is something that we do at least 3 times a day or more for our entire lives. We need to eat. And so, especially when we consider the concept that we as dietitians appreciate, which is exposure and modeling, that means that we are always, every single day, every time we put something in our mouth, have an opportunity to educate about food. And that's that food nutrition kind of line, right? So for me, this is all food literacy. My goal is to redefine food education that honors childhood and those educational experiences that are developmentally attuned to ages and stages. And I know a lot of people refer to like Piaget's ages and stages, and I definitely consider that as a solid value in my work. But he is not the only theorist, and there is a lot more integrative theories and theorists and models that should be considered. But here are some big overarching things. No matter the age, it should be interactive, it should be engaging, it should be inclusive and representative. You want it to be safe and encouraging and use positive language. You want it to be an encouraging environment. You will modify those kinds of things based on those ages and stages, but it's going to be this supportive language, and shaping the environment to feel that a child is valued. And we know there's this shift between like 1.5 and 3, where we start seeing that autonomy. So here's how we kind of teach about food and nutrition, starting, let's say, at 6 months to 1 year. We are introducing a whole bunch of foods. And when kids are playing and mushing and squishing, that is food education. We're not telling them, you need to eat more of this. Well, you might, but I hope that this will help reframe. But, at that point, they aren't choosing the food. So your goal is to maximize variety of foods and flavors and textures and spices. This is really about, there is a great body of research around flavor learning at this age, and that is food education. So for babies, that's perfect. And reading books with food and showing and calling food by their name. This is language development. That's food education. Yep. Then when we get to, toddlers, what we want to do is make it interactive learning experiences. So you're still doing those same things. We're still exploring foods, flavors, but then we can add in that sensory exploration and integration. So we have our 5 senses, and we are using descriptive words. I actually have a visual descriptive words book because of this. So my oldest is my kiddo that she has never liked anything mushy or squishy, even when she was a baby, where most kids are like taking the avocado and the banana, never. And so, I had to do soft food, but it had to have some texture to it. Preschoolers, so age 3 to 5, and all of these things, right? So if you mirror neutrality with some of the food or some of the, around neutrality around food with some of the tools and tactics that you see in books and in TV shows for kids, we know that there's storytelling and it's play-based and it's open-ended and it's fun and it's inviting. Early childhood is a time of rapid brain development. So they are learning about their world and the way things fit in with each other just by doing. Yeah. And so 3 to 5 is play, role playing, storytelling, and of course my jam and a big tenet of my work is integrating food education with STEAM experiences. Mm-hmm. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Traditionally, people would talk about STEM, but I think the arts is in everything. And if you are not including art, then you are doing yourself a disservice, because creativity and imagination is huge learning. And it's important because creativity leads to the innovation of the future, because you are able to think outside the box in different ways. Yeah. And so then we get to early elementary school. So this is often a little more structured, but we can integrate nutrition education or food education and STEAM concepts in principles and sensory exploration. I kind of oftentimes will lump sensory exploration under STEAM. That's kind of, it does fall under those tenets, but for younger kids, I especially pull that out because they can be kind of their own thing. But what we're doing is we're kind of scaffolding the education and information. So once we get into elementary age, like I have a ABC book. I wrote a book for my oldest. It is A to Z, and it is an emergent reader book. So it is using fruits and vegetables, and they have every letter has a little mini story per page, and it's alliterative, and it has different letter sounds with the alliteration. And so the learning here is A is, Ava brings apple pie to the amusement park, or it's that I think that's what it says on for apple. Like it may not be exact, but then it's, oh, what are the different A sounds? Can we trace the A with our finger? Where's that capital A and the lowercase a? And so what we're doing here is, it doesn't feel like it's food education, but we have eggplant, which only one of my kids sort of likes sometimes. But we also have all different vegetables that maybe your kids aren't eating yet, growth mindset. And we are teaching literacy, quite literally, in addition to exposure about food, inviting this curiosity. And that is the heart of everything that I do, is using the magic of childhood. If you had a why asker, then you'll know exactly what I mean. And that natural curiosity to then apply STEAM principles to invite exploration to learn more about food.
Great. I love it. And then after that school age, do you go on beyond? Have you gone on to like that middle school age and the high school education principles around food education?
Yes. So I actually just wrote a curriculum, a health education curriculum for a private school in New York for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. With food education. And so the same that, when we're talking about like early elementary and late elementary, so usually up to about 6th grade, these are the kinds of things that we're doing. Like when we get to later elementary, it's going to switch from to more like a collaborative approach and project based. The level of STEAM integration and complexity becomes more challenging. Small projects, but my goal is to have it be as open-ended and child-led as possible, which means like I like to say I have a STEAM-powered book, and it's you choose your adventures in food. So if you have a child who's very interested in art, then come up with art type activities like comic strips or storytelling or making prints, things like that. But when we get to middle school and then, of course, high school age, what we're doing here is we can start getting into more the specific of nutrition and science. We can talk about those macronutrients, but again, those lessons are still neutral, and they are still from a positive lens where we're not saying this is better than this. Right. We are inviting this conversation, providing accurate, concise, simple, and neutral education, instead of bringing this influence from, our upbringing or the things that we've heard. But we can neutralize it by inviting that learning extension and STEAM integration that allows us. So, it might look like inviting, like when we're learning about history, we're learning about anthropology and the people and what they ate and how they prepared it. And an extension activity might be, okay, create a meal that these people from this time would consume, something like that. So it's about scaffolding and building that information. And it's certainly appropriate to start bringing in true nutrition education. But again, it should not be from this diet culture healthism lens that it is your moral value. It's, hey, we know that, we want to, this is what trans fats are. They take a fat, they change its structure. We go through we have the cis and then the trans, and and when we do this, this actually likes to stick in our blood vessels like Velcro. And that's why we try to have more of, fruits and vegetables, or what can help us if we have a person who is eating a lot of foods that have, plaque in their arteries. And we're teaching from a very, I like to teach from a biology, anatomy, physiology perspective. That's the way my brain works, how do we help that with the foods that we eat? Well, we can consume more fiber. And there's two kinds of fiber. And, one kind of fiber is the kind that kind of helps clean out those blood vessels. And so we're being accurate. We're being specific. We are building knowledge, but it's based on our science that we know today.
Yeah. It's not virtuous. It's not got a hidden motivation to try to motivate somebody to eat a certain way.
Someone.
Yeah.
I hate that.
I know. I love what you're doing. And I do wish we had more time to dive into the binaries and the black and white thinking. But I think we have talked a lot about just where we are with education, where we've been, where we're going. I love that you're leading this charge of this more modern approach that is neutral, non-biased, and informative. And so to that end, if my listeners are wondering, where can I find Dani? Where can I get her books? Can you share that? And I'll include whatever links in our show notes so that people can click on them and go directly. But tell us, or tell my listeners, where they can find you and a little bit about your books.
Absolutely. Thank you. So you can find me at kidfoodexplorers.com and kid.food.explorers on social media. Unfortunately, my entire website was stolen from the back end of my web server in January. And so I have been working since then to rebuild that content. And so hopefully in the next couple weeks, it will be back up and running. And I have a variety of books and printables. My two newest titles that came out, Becoming a Food Explorer and a Steam-Powered Food Adventure, have free companion guides. And those are learning extensions for parents to understand and know how to age appropriate interact with their kids to continue the conversation. And then I also, with most of my resources, have a paid activity pack, which is designed if you have a child who's able to read and write, for them to take this activity pack and do on their own, or younger kids with a little bit of guidance from their parents. All hands-on DIY, crafting, integrating that STEAM into fun activities. You can find all my books on Amazon. You can Google, Dani Lebovitz, or through my website, and also linked in my social media accounts is my Amazon authors page, where you'll see all of my books. And if you want to connect again and have more, extend the conversation about the binary talk and, core values and things like that, I'm happy to come back and chat further.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure to have you. You're doing such great work. And I actually have your A to Z fruits and A to Z vegetables books, and they are absolutely beautiful. They're beautifully designed. So it's a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for all the work that you're doing on behalf of children. I do appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and a privilege, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The Nourished Child. Many thanks also to Dani, my guest, for sharing her time and insights for you, my listeners. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support this show and my work, please take a minute to follow this podcast, leave a rating and review, and visit thenourishedchild.com to sign up for my weekly newsletter called The Munch. You can also follow me on Instagram at i.am.pdrd, and don't forget to take the Healthy Habits quiz on thenourishedchild.com and pre-order my newest book, Kids Thrive at Every Size. The official pre-order bonus packages are available. So if you sign up or purchase a pre-ordered copy of the book, you will get the first chapter immediately in your inbox. And you will also get a bundle of digital downloads and admission to a free live event with me that will occur in September. All of these bonuses will ship out to you by August 30th, but more likely right around the time of the book release, which is August 13th. I hope you support me and pre-order the book. That's it this week, folks. In the meantime, give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.